whispers crawl, where the broken shadows stain the wall. A heavy step echoes through the deadened air. The warden walks, and terror follows everywhere. Keys like iron tombstones ring, a lullaby no saint soul should sing. He knows each scream, each name, each plea, for none escape his registry. Warden of the asylum, master of the locked and lost. He binds the night with fear and frost, keeper of the secrets no one dares recall. Warden of the asylum, ruler of the endless behind his mask, the darkness stares, cold as the thoughts no mind should bear. His coat drags like a mourning shroud, a ghost made flesh, a silence loud. He turns the key and worlds collapse, sanity breaks in his iron grasp. The lights flicker when he draws near, even the walls remember fear. Warden of the asylum, master of the locked and lost. He binds the night with fear and frost, keeper of the secrets no one dares recall. Warden of the asylum, ruler of the endless hall. Hear the scraping chains, a promise not a threat. Every sin, every pain, he collects each debt. No hope, no dawn, no calm within. Only the warden and the weight of every sin. Warden of the asylum, when nightmares learn to crawl, where broken souls obey his call. When the last light fades and the lost ones fall, he stands unending, king of the iron hall. King of the iron hall.
All right, we're back here in the visiting ward, somewhere that, quite frankly, I was surprised to find us again. Um, Today, first of all, welcome back to the visiting ward. Today's episode is a personal one, and for many of us listening, this is a personal one for many of us listening. For many of you listening, and maybe for you too. We're not talking about it's a ribbit. We're not talking about something that people really talk about. We're talking about being raised by a single parent. Not to judge, not to blame, but to understand. Because growing up with one parent can shape how we love, how we cope, how we see responsibility, and how we see ourselves. Being raised by a single parent doesn't come with one universal story. Some of us were raised by incredible self sacrificing parents who did everything they could. Some of us grew up in survival mode. Some of us felt emotionally supported and financially stressed. Others had the opposite. And sometimes it wasn't the absence of a parent that hurt the most, it was the silence around the absence. No explanations, no conversations, just the feeling that something was missing and that we weren't supposed to ask about it. One of the things that doesn't get talked about enough is how often children in single parent homes grow up too fast. You might have, if you were in a single parent home, become the strong one, felt responsibility for your parents' emotions, learned not to ask for help, or felt guilty for having needs at all. Many kids raised by a single parent become emotional adults in small bodies. You learn independence early, but independence can turn into isolation if you're not careful. You stop asking for comfort, you stop expecting consistency, and eventually you stop believing anyone will show up unless you handle everything yourself. But what shows up later, much later in life, is if you were raised by a single parent, you might struggle with trust, you might fear abandonment, you might overattach or underattach, feel comfortable relying on others, or constantly feel like you're too much. Some people become hyper independent, others become deeply afraid of being alone. Neither means that you're broken. It means you've learned to adapt to survive, and survival patterns don't automatically disappear just because life gets quieter. Here's something important: you can be grateful for your parent and still acknowledge the pain. You can honor their effort without minimizing your experience. Two truths can exist at the same time. Many single parents did the best they could with what they had, and many children still grew up carrying emotional weight that wasn't theirs to carry. Healing doesn't mean blaming, it means being honest. Healing often starts with asking questions like, what did I need but didn't receive? Where did I learn to stay quiet instead of asking? What parts of me learned to survive instead of feel safe? Reparenting yourself means allowing rest without guilt, letting people show up for you, learning that needing support doesn't make you weak. Weak. You deserve care, not just resilience. You're not alone. You're not ungrateful. You're not broken. You're someone who learned how to survive early, and now you're learning how to live. I grew up with a single parent. I grew up with just my mother. I watched as she went through two relationships that didn't work out. I grew up with just my mom. I grew up with a stepdad who was drunk, and with my mom still raising me basically by herself with no help. And I turned out fine because my mother raised me to be a gentleman. My mother raised me to survive. She showed me what it, she showed me how to do things early on. She showed me how to cook. She showed me how to do dishes. She showed me how to take care of myself. And sometimes do you get that feeling in your heart that something's missing? I did for a little bit. Because did I miss my father? Yes. But I only had my mother. And I didn't have become the strong one mentality. I had the don't show any emotions mentality. I didn't feel responsible for my mother's emotions. I didn't feel responsible for, I didn't learn not to ask for help. I didn't feel guilty for having needs. And a lot of these kids nowadays, they struggle. They struggle because they don't have two parents. But studies show that kids that are raised by a single parent are more likely to, because they don't have one figure or the other, they're more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely to end up in the life of crime. And what it all comes down to is as a small child, how do you overcome that? How do you stop from going down that path? You find after school activities. You find things that you can do that don't require other people. You find friends that you know aren't troublemakers. And you're going to struggle with trust. You're going to struggle with the fear of abandonment. You're going to struggle with either over attaching or under attaching to someone. You're going to feel uncomfortable relying on others. You're going to constantly feel like you're too much. You're not. You adapted to survive. You adapted so that you could at some point do the same for your parent. But kids nowadays, they they grow up with a single parent, and then when it's time for them to move out, they don't think about the parent. They think about themselves. And it wasn't anything they did. It wasn't any way that they were raised. It's just who they are. I'm grateful to my mother every day. She basically was a mother and a father figure to me. She taught me how to play baseball. She taught me how to play football. She taught me how to play basketball. She bought my pair of cleats so that I could play football when I was in high school. And if you grew up in a single parent household, always remember your parent that you had did the best they could. Your parent that you had took on the load of two parents. You can't, sometimes your parent will find someone else who is willing to take on the role of either stepmother or stepfather. But most parents, yeah, they'll date. Yeah, they'll find someone they enjoy being around. But most parents don't bother to find someone to be another parent figure for their child. They stay single. They feel like they have to do it all by themselves. And you, as a child, you don't understand what's going on. You don't understand why mommy and daddy split up. You don't understand why mommy and daddy went their separate ways and why you're stuck with daddy or why you're stuck with mommy. You only understand that you only understand the emotion that comes with it. You don't understand why. You don't understand what happened. And you grow up And whenever you get to your teenage years, you start to question things. Some of those questions can be exactly what it said down here: healing and reparenting yourself. What did I need but didn't receive? Where did I learn to stay quiet instead of asking? What parts of me learned to survive instead of feeling safe? You grow up, kids grow up so fast. Some of them grow up to be great adults. Some of them end up in prison. And there's no actual dedicated place for children to go after school. So a child who may live in a single family, a single parent household, may not have an after school program to go to or have somewhere that he can go to stay out of trouble, he or she. Raising a child as a single parent is not something I wish on anyone. I know that I know it would be harder to raise a child as a single parent. I watched what my mom went through. We lived paycheck to paycheck. We still do. And you struggle. You struggle really, really hard. You struggle not to break yourself as a child. You struggle not to show emotions. You struggle to understand what's going on. And it's not that you don't understand, it's that you don't understand enough. And you're afraid to ask questions to your mother or father. You're afraid to ask them questions. Me, I just became the one that I was the child that, yes, I gave my mother a hard time, but I also was a rock. I was best at not showing my emotions. I was the, I had the strong one mentality, you could say, but I wasn't really the strong one. And there are times in your life where you'll look back and you'll be like, what what caused my lack of trust? What caused the what caused me to become this way? You you know you never know. You never know what caused it. And then you think back to your childhood and you look at it and you try to analyze it. You can't. So growing up in a single parent household was tough. And it is tough. That's why that's why I'm glad that Ellie has me and her mom. I'm glad that Ellie has both parents. Because honestly, when Ellie hits puberty and has her first uh, womanly month, all daddy's going to know to do is go get pads. Daddy's not going to be able to explain what's going on. So I'm going to be like any other father out there. Daddy, I'm bleeding. I'm going to go get you some pads. I'll be back. But yeah, you should always be grateful to your parent. You should always honor their effort. And many children did grow up carrying emotional weight that wasn't theirs to carry. Healing takes time for anything. Just like for the podcast before this, where we talked about insecurities. Well, it wasn't before this, but it was a few podcasts ago. We talked about insecurities. It takes time to heal. You have to form boundaries. You have to, in with the way that it's worded, reparent yourself. You have to let people show up for you. You have to learn that needing support doesn't make you weak. You have to allow yourself to rest without feeling guilt. And again, you're not alone. You're not ungrateful. And you're not broken. You're just someone who learned how to survive early. And now you're learning to live. So, in closing, I just want to say if you grew up in a single parent household, you're still loved. You're loved to the you're loved just as much as a person that grew up in a two parent household. Whatever parent raised you, if you have both, great. Whatever parent raised you, though, if you had a single parent household, they loved you to no end. And they still do. You should never feel unwanted. You should never feel wrong for a past that you didn't control. Always look forward. Always look at the silver lining. Because growing up with one parent shapes how you love, how you cope, and how you see responsibility and how you see yourself. So just remember, growing up with one parent is not necessarily a bad thing because a single parent, and I'm speaking from experience, a single parent can play both the role of mother and father and teach you everything. And to all the single parents out there, thank you. Thank you for taking the responsibility to raise your children. Thank you for thank you for not giving up on them. And until next time, guys, I'm going to close the doors, lock them, and hopefully we don't have another podcast until after the new year. So guys, I'm going to wish you a happy new year. And until next time, I'm the warden, Matt Kildorn, and I'll see you next time, guys. Good night.